Hello, future social workers. Welcome to week 8 of Social Work 321. Hope you're all enjoying the class. I have two attention-getting activities or items for our class today. First of all, check out Daisy's new dress. Isn't it cute? She's got lollipops. So, yeah, this is to illustrate the concept that I've tried to teach you about preparing yourself, centering yourself, doing the work on you so that your session can be all about the client and not about you, right? Remember, you get ready, you take the time to get ready, yeah, and then you can forget yourself and focus on others, focus on your client, not you. So the second is my trusty avocado spray. Yeah, I'm not going to spray you or anything. I'm not going to spray you, don't worry. But this is from Trader Joe's. It's really good stuff. I don't own stock or anything, but this is what I spray into a frying pan before I cook an egg or whatever. And what does it do? Well, it prevents a whole lot of cleanup later on. So when you're working, last week we talked a lot about preparing, and remember, if you prepare just a little bit, it can prevent damage later on, and that's what we do when we're preparing. So today we're going to talk about beginning. You have an important paper that's due this week, and a lot of the concepts from chapter 8 are going to be a big part of what you are doing in your paper. And I'm just going through making sure that I have the right assignment. So we are in week 8. Can you believe it? Time flies when you are having fun. We're halfway through the semester. Yay us. So this week you have an observational paper. So basically what I want you to do with this assignment is you're going to you're going to choose a video clip from a popular movie. The choices include Prince of Tides, As Good as It Gets, Ordinary People, or Good Will Hunting. So I've seen all of these movies. They're great flicks that talk about some kind of a mental health issue going on. So what I want you to do is write about accurate observation and non-biased description. So this is an important part of professional communication. So for this assignment, you're going to watch the video and then write a paper detailing your observation from the video. You'll need to describe in detail the physical setting, the interaction between relevant people, and the physical appearance of the people in the video. You're going to write about the verbal and nonverbal communication that's exhibited by the professional, and your descriptions need to rely on non-biased and non-judgmental language. So also I want your descriptions to be as accurate as possible. And yes, I've seen all 4 of these movies. I actually really enjoy all 4 of these movies. I read the book, The Prince of Tides. Oh, wow, that is an amazing book. Pat Conway, great author. So that's your assignment this week, and you only have 1 assignment, so that's kind of cool. I hope you're all prepping for spring break that's coming up. Whether you work ahead on spring break or take a break, that's up to you. Yeah, that's your only assignment this week. You do have a variety of supplemental material, and it is supplemental, but while you're doing dishes, folding laundry, these are good video. They're mostly video clips to watch, and there's some really good stuff in there about substance abuse and things that will help you better understand the world of mental health and the process of beginning and I know we've done preparatory. It seems like we're drawing this out a little bit, but it's going to be some good information that you'll hear today, I hope. All right. So, in terms of beginning, we're going to talk not just about beginning working with a client, but the beginning of every session, there's some specific things that you need to do. And we've already touched on these things a little bit, but we're going to go over them a little more thoroughly today. So again, first impressions, you never get a second chance, right? So that initial face-to-face contact, it often is going to affect all future encounters. If someone's if the first time they perceive you as an individual, it's positive, then subsequently it's going to be positive. So when I worked as a school social worker at the beginning of the year, I would tell the kids in the school, in the opening assembly, that I'm Mrs. D and I love knock-knock jokes. So for the rest of the year, I would hear every knock-knock joke. And the little, first graders would come up, knock, knock, and then they'd make up something insane. And it would be hilarious because they're so cute and little. But so anyway, that was kind of a way I opened myself up. So I basically presented myself as a fun person, someone who enjoys humor. And that can always be a good way to break the ice. One of the things that I think is an important concept to remember is that people put up walls, right? They put them up brick by brick. So what you want to do as a social worker is figure out what the loose brick is, okay? So a lot of the times that can be done through humor. Sometimes it takes more effort than others. In your sessions, if you've got a client that doesn't want to be there, they're court ordered, you know what? It might take some time to figure out where that loose brick is and get it out of there so that you can connect with the individual. But that initial face-to-face contact is going to have a lot to do with that. It's going to have a lot to do with their perceptions of who you are as a human being. The beginning portion of each subsequent interview tends to influence the course of those meetings as well. So every time you meet with a person, there should be a few things that kind of set the groundwork, set the foundation for the rest of the session. So when you're first meeting with a client, every single time, even if you've met with them for, 12 weeks and you have a 14-week session that you're doing, they're court ordered to come to your classes for 14 weeks and you're on the 12th week, guess what? You're still going to do the same thing. And this is one of in the group settings where you have new individuals. If you have an open group that you're facilitating and you have new individuals that come in every week, then this makes more sense, right? When you introduce yourself, you're not going to introduce yourself the same time with an individual because they're going to know you. But there's going to be patterns of communication that you will follow. When it's the very first time, you're going to seek introductions from them. You're going to introduce yourself by telling them who you are, what your purpose is, and you're going to orient the client, make sure that they understand policy and any ethical factors, and then you're going to seek feedback from them. Do you understand what I'm saying? Do you have any issues with this ethical situation? So common ways for making contact with a client system. What about that? What about when we're working with an individual and we recognize we need more information than what they're providing? Maybe we will decide to reach out to a client system. What would this be? If you are, working with an individual and you recognize that they have a problem that might stem from a family system that is dysfunctional, then perhaps you want to meet with the entire family. That can be challenging, but it can be done, and it can be incredibly helpful as well. There are times that I know I've worked with individuals on the autism spectrum and recognized that the school system, that there were some professionals within the school system that did not have a working understanding and knowledge of autism and autistic traits and what these individuals are capable of and what motivates them. And so I would do an educational PowerPoint presentation for the school of the autistic individual, and educate the entire faculty and even some of the staff on what motivates autistic individuals. I did this so many times that it became known in the community I was living with, and so I was invited to do it for some of the medical professionals of this community, as well as some of the other agencies within the community. And so this can be an important way to better educate those around. So remember, as social workers, we have a systems approach, right? So we don't just look at the individual and we don't just look at the psychological factors, we look at the cultural factors. And so sometimes if there's a broken culture around these individuals, that needs to be fixed as well. So someone else may believe that a client system would benefit from help and request that a social worker or an agency intervene. You might have all kinds of opportunities to do these, short educational seminars or workshops. Effective beginnings result when the worker and the prospective client accomplish the purpose for which they first meet. Excuse me. So, and you remember last week we talked about preparing, and so information gathering, information giving, assessment forming, or change making. These could be different purposes that we have. Reaching a mutual agreement concerning the next step in the process. When you first meet a client and introduce yourself, you're going to identify yourself by your full name, by your profession, by your agency, by your department affiliation. A friendly facial expression and a handshake are generally appropriate, but of course we need to be sensitive to cultural differences. When you're seeking introductions, a client ask the client how they wish to be addressed, how they pronounce their name, very, very important. Sometimes they might go by a nickname, and that would be more appropriate to call them that than by their full name. I've found that especially in working with children, they tell you who they want to be, and they tell you what they want to be called, and sometimes it's different than what their family calls them. Sometimes they want to go by their full name, and their family, they want to be Andrew, and their family's still calling him Drew. And so make sure that you are taking your cues from the client, not from systems outside of them, not from subcultures like their family of origin, but from the client themselves. In family and group contexts, you may find it useful to ask members to introduce themselves in a go-around. And one of the effective methods that I have used in the past is having an item that you hold within, especially if you're working in a group setting, that the person who is holding the object is allowed to speak. Okay, and if they're not holding it, it's not their turn to speak. This can be especially effective in a family where there is a scapegoat within the family, and this is very, very a normal situation in a dysfunctional family, is that one individual is the scapegoat, and they are not allowed to talk as much or as often as other more dominant members of the family. And so if you have equal time by holding the doll or the stuffed toy or the ball or whatever it is that you have, maybe it's spray oil. Okay, anyway, it can be anything, but when they're holding it is when they get to talk. So describing the initial purpose, new clients tend to look to the social worker for leadership. You are a leader, and this will happen wherever you work. Whatever aspect you work as a social worker, there will be people that look to you. In fact, once you have earned that social work license and you have social work as part of your social worker as part of your title, people are going to come out of the woodwork. I promise you. It's crazy. When I worked as a school social worker, I would have teachers, colleagues, parents, all kinds of people would say, let me tell you about my divorce or whatever. Or can you help me with this situation? Or, my cousin's son is autistic. What do you know about, And so you'll be surprised. You will be identified as a professional who is capable of understanding all kinds of different concepts. And, leadership is a big part of what you do. You will lead by discussing your view of the purpose for the meeting. When you are in a professional setting, in a meeting situation, you will often be looked to as the person who is going to keep their head on when everybody else is losing it, okay? You are going to be the one who keeps your cool. So, guidance for clients is a big part of what happens when we provide adequate leadership. It's going to reduce the stress of people in the meeting. It's going to help them conclude that you know what you're doing if you are providing effective leadership. And, there's so much training involved that you are going to be confident in your ability to lead. It is rigorous, and I know that many of you feel very challenged by the paperwork, how many papers you have to write in your educational process, but I promise you the intent is to prepare you for a career in which you will be respected. So, describing the initial purpose of the meeting. So, what is the purpose of the session? It's going to be, perhaps it's going to be socialization. And this could include identity development. It also could include skill development. The initial purpose could be re-socialization. And this might include social control activities or rehabilitation services and activities. So re-socialization, when I was working as a school social worker, one of the things that I did was provided a group that met once a week that were made up of students that had been identified as likely being on the spectrum. They might not have been diagnosed with autism spectrum behavior, but they didn't have the same social skill set. So we called it our social skills group. And it definitely, just the title of it identified what the purpose of the group was. And that was very helpful. When the purpose of the meeting is clear, then workers can describe the roles they will assume in the helping process. Perhaps you're meeting with Child Protective Services. You are the mental health professional, and perhaps there are other social workers that are family advocates. Maybe there's a case manager. Perhaps there's an educator. There could be an investigator. There could be a facilitator. There's so many varieties that social workers, there's a variety of hats that we wear. There could be a broker, a counselor, a therapist. So it's important to describe what the role is that different individuals in that meeting are taking on. When I've been in settings, when I've worked with Child Protective Services and I've been the therapist for an individual who is being evaluated in their ability to parent a child and provide a safe environment for them, it's very interesting. Your contribution is very valued. At the same time, a lot of the times the Child Protective Services worker, they're kind of trained to see the mother bear instinct as a grizzly bear. So I have to tell my client, let's bring in the claws. I know that you're very protective of your children, which is appropriate, but let's make sure that the Child Protective Services worker is seeing that good side of you as well. And if you are working in the role of Child Protective Service worker, you're going to want to see it, and I think it's important that you are trained to see it from the most vulnerable person's perspective, but sometimes we need to be able to see it from the person who has been labeled as the perpetrator as well. So, and I'm not trying to minimize child abuse by any means, but at the same time, I think that whatever role you're serving in a meeting like that, it's good to see everybody's perspective as well, but recognize what your role is. If you're there to defend the perpetrator, then that's what your role is. If you're there to defend the most vulnerable person, then that's what you're doing. At the same time, be able to step out of that and see it from other perspectives, and you'll be able to work better with these individuals. And that's another important concept when we're in meeting situations, is remember that group is made up of individuals, and everybody has their own worldview and perspective. All right, orienting clients. A new client is going to be unsure what to expect. They're likely to be anxious. Anxiety is a big part of what happens. So what motivated them to come to you in the first place? There's probably anxiety behind that. They might be concerned that they won't be capable of doing what's expected of them. They might feel like they need to show a certain image to you, which isn't exactly what's going on. Orienting new clients as to what the process will entail, that can alleviate a lot of this anxiety that they're feeling. Helping them understand what they can do to help the worker help them relieves a lot of the stress. So when you identify what you need from them, that's going to alleviate the stress. And it also reduces the number of dropouts. And remember, that's kind of your goal. You want to see your client come back, and you want to see them come back for their own benefit as well as for job security for you. But we're going to communicate that as their benefit, right? It's about them, not about you. Discussing policy and ethical factors is a big part of what we do. Information about agency policies and ethical factors have to be discussed with new clients. This is part of informed consent, right? They've signed a form about informed consent. Failure to discuss these things may be grounds for malpractice action. Agency policy and ethical factors constitute the ground rules for the helping process. Understanding the ground rules is a critical element in developing an authentic, honest, and trusting relationship. If we don't have a solid foundation, why should they trust us? If there isn't a solid, and so those ground rules provide that foundation. If you're working with an individual that has not had a lot of good firm boundaries in their life, then this can be challenging for them, especially if it's a child. If this is if they're maybe I had a 12-year-old young man once that I worked with that his parents were just not good at establishing good boundaries. And that was a lot of this kid's problem, is that no didn't mean no. It meant push, push, push until he got a yes. And so you need to be firm. You need to have firm boundaries. Ground rules establish those. But what happens if you tell your client that you're going to start on time, if you're working with a group, and the group is supposed to start at 6 o'clock, but you say, oh, well, it's 6:05. Let's give everybody else a chance to get here. Guess what? You're not respecting the people that got there on time, are you? Yeah, start on time, end on time. This might be one of your solid ground rules. So, establishing trust is super important with these individuals. Discussing policies. Among the policies and ethical factors include confidentiality. We've talked a lot about that, but we're going to keep talking about it because confidentiality is so important. Mandatory abuse reporting, not just child abuse, but elderly abuse. If anyone's in danger, right? What happens here stays here unless someone's in danger. That's what I would always say at the beginning of every session. Action required if a person is a danger to himself or others. Fees and cancellation policies. Again, 3 strikes and you're out, right? So if you don't show up, And one of the things that I would do, especially when working with Medicaid clients, is I would recognize there are going to be clients that don't show. I'm going to have paperwork that I can do if they don't show. It's not going to be a ton of skin off my nose, but I'm only going to allow it 3 times, and then I will not see that client again, and I will be firm on that. They have to know. As you model for them these firm boundaries, they'll be able to create them for themselves more readily. And as you model it for them, you're going to be serving yourself as well. So the word will get out that you will not tolerate clients missing their sessions, and that will make you'll just be able to benefit from that. Procedures for discussing dissatisfaction with services. If someone is not, happy, and it's okay, not everybody is going to appreciate your style, or perhaps your specialty areas is not what that individual needs, and you don't really figure it out until 3 or 4 sessions. And, if you need to refer a client out, there's nothing wrong with that. And there can be a variety of reasons that you need to do that. It could be for your own sense of well-being. It could be that you feel like you're not qualified to work with that individual. It could be that you feel qualified, but for some reason there's just a clash. There was a study that I read in graduate school where it talked about the majority of women. There were more women per capita that seek out social workers, and more men per capita seek out psychologists. And it was really interesting. You're trying to figure out, well, what's the difference? Well, when you look at the research, more women become social workers because women are more likely to need a fast track to professionalism, whereas men in our sexist culture have more of a support system. They have more of a network of support that's kind of an integral part of their network, and so the structure of their lives has built-in support, and so they're able to get through a PhD degree, whereas women are less likely to do that. So more women become social workers, more men become PhDs, and guess what? Women want to talk to women about their problems, and men want to talk about men. So you might have someone that works with you for a few weeks, and they just realize, you know what, this just isn't working for me, and that's okay. Don't ever be offended by that, because there's going to be someone that comes to you that you click perfectly with, and that you're the best person that could have helped them. And you don't have to be all things to all people. That's okay. An important part of communicating effectively involves making sure that your client understands your messages. And how do you do that? You seek feedback. So seeking feedback is something that should be a routine part of what you're doing. So is there anything, do you understand what I'm saying to you? Asking open-ended questions that help them clarify what you have just said. Making sure that you're seeking feedback throughout the entire course of your work with the client. So when you seek feedback, make sure that you're asking client to identify anything that's unclear. Share thoughts. Ask them to share thoughts that have occurred to them. Ask them, if this introduces a new topic for them, and you could introduce a new topic, and then come back to the old one. Make sure that they're remembering some of the concepts that you've discussed. Express any disagreements about your comments. Sometimes you might have I had one individual that was she was court ordered to come to anger management classes, but she really had no surface red flags that showed that she had an anger problem. And she told me, she says, I don't. In fact, it's quite the opposite. My parents taught me to suppress that anger was never appropriate. And so, it was really interesting. She had basically exploded because she had been suppressing these emotions for so long. So seeking that feedback and recognizing that that was part of what had happened for her, she wasn't able to let off steam like a lot of us do, a little at a time, by expressing our emotions. So when she was allowed to learn how to do that in a controlled setting, she was able to better manage her anger so it didn't come in spurts, in violent spurts. So when you seek feedback, you send a message that this is a mutual and a reciprocal process, that it's not about you teaching or telling or fixing or informing. It's a mutual process. You want to learn about the client, and you're evaluating them constantly. And as they evaluate the information that you give them, as they recognize this is a safe place, and so they can share more about themselves so that you can analyze, guess what? They're going to analyze too. And so that's an important part of what we do. Okay, well, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, don't hesitate to call, text, or email me. I'm here for you. And I hope you're all learning and growing and enjoying this course. I really enjoyed teaching it, and Daisy's had a good time today. She'll see you next time. Say bye. No, you just love me. I know. Oh, doggies are so awesome.